Hi everyone. As you can see, I do not have an audience tonight. Road conditions are still pretty bad where I live, so I decided just to stay home and not take the risk of going out. And my video conference is not working right now, so no audience tonight. On July 13th, 2015, Barack Obama commuted 46 drug offenders from prison. They were to be released in November of 2015 and put in drug treatment centers to be rehabilitated back into civilization. Barack Obama released this statement about the issue in the conference. The punishment didn't fit the crime. He made the observation that the American people felt too comfortable with putting nonviolent drug offenders in prison for life. Nonviolent drug offenders should be rehabilitated in drug treatment facilities and given therapy instead of being sentenced to prison, where violent behaviors are learned and prison gang life is enforced by other inmates. In doing so, there needs to be an understanding of learned violence in prison, the cost of overcrowding in prison, and how much prison costs versus drug rehabilitation. Violence in prison is learned, and nonviolent offenders are often released with more knowledge about violence than when they were sentenced. This leads to a higher rate of recidivism, or a relapse in criminal behavior. On television channel MSNBC, there is a show called Lockup Raw. Lockup Raw is a series of documentaries that shows the daily life of various prison inmates and tells their stories. A common practice among inmates is to join a prison gangs, based on what racial group the inmate is. Some might say, don't join a prison gang. However, a gang in prison upholds protection for the inmate, and oftentimes, if the inmate does not join the gang, they will become a target for various groups, including the group of their own race. Joining a gang becomes an essential part of literally surviving in prison. After joining a gang, the inmate must uphold their obligations to the gang in and out of prison, or be subjected to the consequences, which often include violence. A common saying amongst prison gang members, according to many prison gang inmates' statement is, "The only way out is death." This brings about a vicious cycle for the originally nonviolent drug offenders. According to National Institution of Justice, 76.9% of drug offenders are rearrested for a new and often violent crime. So, why should you care? If someone is doing or distributing drugs, then they deserve to have consequences. And I agree to a point. However, if the crime is nonviolent, the punishment does not need to be as harsh as a prison sentence when the offender is subjected to violence and also obtains new knowledge of violence, especially when overcrowding in prisons costs the taxpayers money. And drug treatment centers cost less for the taxpayers and often present recidivism. Overcrowding in prisons costs the taxpayers a substantial amount of money. America is number 1 in the world for highest prison population and prison rate. Overcrowding leads to dysfunction and inhumane living conditions due to the massive amount of prisoners versus correctional officers and medical staff. Perhaps the most appalling example of overcrowded is in California. The population in prisons has grown 500% between 1977 and 1998. In fact, the overcrowding has gotten so bad that in recent years, the governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, had to call a state of emergency because the living conditions of prisoners were deemed unconstitutional. What exactly does this mean for taxpayers? According to a survey institute, the average annual cost to incarcerate one inmate in federal prison is $29,000 of the state's taxpayers' dollars. California being on the high end at $60,000 per inmate per year. So then the question comes to this. What is a cheaper alternative for nonviolent prisoners that would help overcrowding, learn violence in prison, and leading to lower recidivism rates, and give more money to the taxpayers? And the answer is as simple as this: sending nonviolent drug offenders to treatment centers instead of prison. According to the same survey institute, about half of the inmates in prison are serving time for nonviolent drug offenses. There are roughly 2.2 million people serving time in prison. Bringing that number down to 1.1 million would help overcrowding substantially. If nonviolent drug criminals never stepped inside a prison, then their learned prison violence would be non-existent, and the rate of recidivism for the offenders would also go down substantially. This means that taxpayers would not only pay for the offender to go to prison once for the original offense, but they would also not pay for the offender to potentially go multiple times for recidivism. Some of these changes are already here, and statistics cannot be argued. New York has changed some laws and has decided to rehabilitate first-time drug offenders rather than put them in prison. The results are a saving of $5,444 per offender. The recidivism rate also dropped as a result of the program, saving the state even more. Maryland had a similar program, and their savings is astonishing. They went from $20,000 to $4,000 per offender per year. It is estimated that California, with a rehabilitation program option, they could save around $150 million annually. America is number 1 in the world for largest prison population and incarceration rate. Shouldn't we strive to be number 1 in something better that'll also help us chip away at our national debt? During the recent commute of 46 drug offenders, President Barack Obama spoke about the commute and his reasoning behind the decision, including his marijuana and cocaine use when he was younger. We have to consider whether it is the smartest way for us to control crime rate and rehabilitate individuals. These are young people who made mistakes that aren't very different from the ones I've made. The difference is that they do not have the support structure, the second chances, and the resources that would allow them to survive these mistakes. Thank you.